So now we will talk about various ways to commence a project. Okay, so because there are many trigger points which happens during the project journey or which happens during your day-to-day life, which would give you some certain kind of a trigger that this is a time that we can pick up a project. Identification of a project, doing a project can be done using different ways. It could be a voice of your stakeholder, it could be a voice of your business, or sometimes it is you who as an individual who analyzed the data, who looked at the data and see, okay, this is where we can do a project. So that's how you yourself also look at the opportunity areas and start working on the project. So in this particular slide, we'll be focusing on what are the various ways to commence a project. Okay. So the first one we have on the list is voice of customer. Okay. Voice of customer project can be done using customer complaints, customer escalations. So if you look at the data, when you see that a lot of end customers were not very happy, you try and look at it, and you can start commencing a project on it. Second, in the voice of business. Voice of business is the voice of your organization, voice of your CEO, voice of your CFO or your COO, who believes that in order to uh, gain profitability or reduce cost, there should be some projects done on improving the same. Okay, so a voice can be triggered from the business also to do certain projects. Okay, this could be discussed during the town hall meeting, during the strategy meeting. This could be discussed during some of the big events also. Okay, so that's how it can be done. So there could be projects done on improving the attrition, absenteeism, cycle time reduction, which is the processing time for a transaction, and if there are any sort of repeated errors. Then we can commence a project on cost of poor quality, which is kind of a rework. We are, uh, People are working on it again and again. There's a lot of rework. So the employee cost is getting utilized. The customer is also getting penalized. That's kind of a cost of poor quality. So if you see that kind of an opportunity, if you see that kind of an opportunity, you can also commence a project on that as well. The objective of this is to achieve first time right. So there can be a lot of projects done on FTR, which is first time right. Some people call it RFT, which is right first time. So that's how a lot of projects can be done, or to improve the poor accuracy. Okay. RTY is rolled throughput yield. Okay, there can be a lot of projects done on that as well, wherein one process is dependent on other processes. Okay, so RTY. First time right, we already talked about. So there can be many projects done on improving the first time right. There can be many more ways, many more trigger points, but majority of the trigger points can come through VOC, VOB, COPQ, RTY, and FTR. So there are a couple of exercises you can do on your own also, because now when you're going through this training, it is very recommended that you start looking at the data of your respective organization and probably try identifying that can be certain projects which can be done. In the upcoming slide, we will talk about how to do that, how to prepare that kind of a framework, how to prepare that kind of a project charter. But first, we have to look at those with those eyes, which would give us a trigger point to start working on the projects. Any question anybody has? Any comment before we move to the next slide? Okay, so I think we are good. So now we are going to start with the define phase of our training. So what is define phase? What is define phase? As we said, when we were talking about the DMAC introduction, we said there are a few phases in it. Defined phase of Six Sigma is typically like a sales pitch. I would always call it as a sales pitch, where we put together uh, what is that required from the project, okay, so that we can anticipate all the questions, what the business owner or the stakeholder wants to know. So it's a kind of a document, it's a kind of a framework, it's a kind of a sales pitch which we as a project leader prepares get an approval from the stakeholder or from the business head to start a project. Okay, it's kind of a proposal form which we prepare for the stakeholders.
Or similar, if I add on to that, it's more of an introduction wherein we are trying to show what we are trying to achieve as an end result, right? It's more
Yes, yes,
to sell it to our bosses so that we can get the approval to start with that particular project.
absolutely. So business case or define phase which we are talking about would have a lot of components. When we cover those components one by one, you'll be able to understand. And I will also show you how does the typical project charter looks like. Uh, and then you will have more questions and then we will answer that. However, it is one particular phase, defined phase, where we are only and only defining the problem, where we are not mentioning the cause of the problem. Even though you have any hypothesis where you think that this could be the cause or this could be the solution, we would never ever mention that in the defined phase of the system. Okay, it is only defining the problem. Okay, remember the medical analogy which I gave. When we walk up to the doctor, we never ever tell that, you know, sir, this could be the reason why. It is the responsibility of a specialist to identify that what could be the cause or what could be the solutions to be provided. So it is always recommended the cause of the problem and the solution of the problem should never ever be part of the defined phase. Okay. So in defined phase, there are typical three things that we looked at. We identify the customer and the project CTQ. So we'll get into it. What is CTQ and what is customer and what is project CTQ. We develop the project charter. So we will talk about the project charter as well. And we define the process map. So these are the broad activities that we do in the defined phase, which would, as I said, for taking approval from the stakeholder or the business head to start a project.